Oh, Patrick Hennessy had a provocative question. You have lots of tools in your shop. Are some tools just for show, like that M7 lathe or the ultra-precise measuring tool from Japan? Just for show? I take umbrage, Patrick. I take umbrage at your suggestion that I might have tools up just for show. For instance, if the sole reason for a tool was so that I could look at it, because I find looking at it an interesting experience, there's something far more important happening than just for show. Like, that's what this, this space is, a space for objects that I don't get tired of looking at, as well as a space for shop tools. But like, if there is something here that proves its lack of utility, it leaves. And I do that all the time. There are lots of tools I put into deeper storage. I just did a shop infrastructure of a bunch of regularly accessible. I had set up this wall of hand tools that would be like the hand tools you go for most often. And when you set something like that up, you've got to revisit it on a semi-regular basis, because it had calcified into, like, all the new tools showed up, just kept on being shoved into shelves back there until it was mostly tools I almost never used. So I took everything out, looked at it again, added a couple shelves, put everything back, and now it's far more useful. But nothing here is just for show. And the M7 lathe, we haven't put up the M7 lathe.
The Pip-Boy? Yeah, we did.
What's that?
The Pip-Boy?
No, not the Pip-Boy, the pantograph.
Oh, no.
Okay. So the M7 lathe has gone back to storage. I will probably sell it or trade it. I don't really need a second lathe. And frankly, if I was going to get a second lathe today, it would be a Hardinge HLV. I know, because I'm fancy. But the lathe went away because it got replaced by another tool that's even heavier. That lathe was 650 pounds. It got replaced by a 1,200-pound tool, which we did a video on that will go up soon. And I'm going to build later on this summer some spectacular things with this new machine. It's a whole new day. That's very exciting. Okay, we did that one. Let's see here. Oh, Crispy Chrissy. I'm trying to answer some questions of people who don't often ask them. Crispy Chrissy says, when was the last time you found yourself looking at a prop in a movie and thinking to yourself, I would have made that totally differently? Did you find yourself impressed, confused, or disappointed by the prop? Just looking to see why I had a reaction. So no, I can't think about having seen a prop in a movie and being surprised at the reason it was built that way. In general, the pipeline between prop masters and fabricators and directors and art directors and production designers is a very robust pipeline. And in general, everything is built for the most part in a very stable and reasonable way. And I know that from the inside of the industry, if you're a prop master, that might not be your direct experience, but in general, the stuff that stands out, I don't find myself second guessing why it was done that way. What I do find myself second guessing is when a prop is filmed in a terrible way. And here's my example. Alien 3. I know there's a lot to get cranky about with Alien 3. One of my biggest issues with Alien 3 is that Bishop is in the ship with Ripley and Newt. And they bring out Bishop and they power him up to talk. And so there's a scene in which Lance Henriksen's Bishop torso is questioned. And this is a classic Alien moment, right? It harks back to Alien with Ash, the robot, his head sitting on the table, etc. But here's the thing about Alien 3. That Bishop puppet was a puppet. That was a fully animatronic, half Lance Armstrong. That was so beautiful. Lance Henriksen. I don't know what the hell. Lance Henriksen. It was so beautifully made. It is a masterpiece. It looks just like him. The movement is super compelling and super intense. And they put it on a table. Now, that might not be obvious why that's a problem to me, but the problem to me is I looked at it and thought, well, it's clearly Lance with his head sticking through a table because he looks great and it's sitting on a table. Why would they put it on a table if they didn't have Lance sticking his head up through it? And it wasn't Lance. So they took this prop that if you had hung it, you'd be like, how did they do that? And they put it on a table. You're like, I know how they did it. It's not that impressive. To me, that's leaving literal money on the narrative table. And as contrast, I will refer you to RoboCop 2, which has some absolutely chilling and intense Peter Weller like squirming around as a half torso that is super evocative and clearly not Peter Weller, and yet like the difficulty of that scene brings you right into the drama of RoboCop. The difficulty of watching that scene and its impossibility. So I was upset on Alien 3 when they put the Lance Henriksen puppet on the table and made me believe that they had just stuck his head up through. Let's see what's been happening here. Stevew, S-T-E-V-E-W, Stevew, says, do you ever have to compete with someone in making the same prop or project? In other words, someone else was assigned as well as yourself and the best build was picked. No art director really does that in my experience. I mean, maybe someone's a chaos monkey and does that. But I have always wanted to see a prop makers contest or a model makers contest in which like 30 people come into a room, they all have the same drawing, they all have the same batch of materials, and they all have the same amount of time. I would love to see what 40 professionals deliver, because I believe that what would be surpassingly surprising about that kind of execution is the variance in quality, but also the variance in the perceived quality. And by that I mean, you'll find if you look at the work of some real old and amazing model makers like the late great Greg Gian, is that he was super fast. He could deliver in a very short time period. And he did that by not over obsessing about the finish of his pieces from this close. He worried about how they looked from about this close. And the difference of that is all based on institutional knowledge, but it allowed him to go very quickly and also not waste too much time on details the camera was never going to see. So the ILM model shop has been having more regular reunions since it closed down, and it has been lovely seeing everybody again on the regular and hanging out and catching up on all of our kids. And there's still some part of me that wants to get like 10 to 20 of us in a room and just spend a day executing one thing and looking at all the different executions of it, because I think the variance would be really surprising. I think you'd set it all up to get the same kind of shot treatment too, and you get to see each one in a nice lit film shot environment as well as in its final execution at the workbench. That just like, there's some part of me. I got pitched a prop making show a few years ago, and it was like that Nick Offerman, Amy Poehler show, Making It. It was like that sort of structure. People would compete in a room to build props under certain time constraints and stuff like that. And in the pitch, we ended up not working together. But in the pitch, I added this. And I still think this would be a great part of a film prop making kind of show, which is the difficulties in making a prop aren't just the complexity of the drawing and the limited amount of time. Not at all. In the summer in Atlanta, if your boss doesn't pay for air conditioning, you're going to have difficulty having your paint dry. You could have a flood. You could have the humidity be super high or super low. Both of those can affect the paint and the glue and the other stuff you're using on the build. How about art directors that can't make a decision? We have all had that. where the parameters of the build change at the very last minute. I feel like all of those amazingly realistic scenarios are exactly, I just love that idea of like, you got to build a thing. And by the way, it's 104 degrees in the room. Good luck. I used to live above an industrial glass kiln. It was a glass studio right below my loft in San Francisco, and the floor was like 75 degrees all the time, and everything I painted in there dried like in a heartbeat. I think the humidity, I mean, I didn't get nosebleeds from the lack of humidity, but it was pretty low in my space, and paint dried instantaneously. It was so spectacular. So yeah, I'd love to see that. If somebody out there ever makes a prop show, a film prop maker show, I think you should add in nutty art directors and ridiculous requests at the last second, and also weather-based, sorry, I was going to curse, but just weather-based difficulties. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I wanted to briefly mention that you could become a tested member. I know, everybody is competing for you to become a member of their thing. What I want to express to you is that the Tested membership has become such an important part of the Tested family. We get tremendous feedback from the Tested members, and they expand the stories that we can tell and the things that we have access to. And you can become a part of it right now by clicking on the link below. See you in the chat.